remember the first time I heard the song Imagine. It was in the 70s, and I was in my maybe 10, 11 years old, like young. And now everybody's doing the math. And I remember being so struck by those words that I wanted to capture them and write them down, because it was the first time that I had imagined like that. And the reason that I asked Carl to sing that song today is because today we are looking at the power of imagination and the power of our word, the power of our power. And it is part of week 5 of our 6-week series on the 12 powers of humankind. And it comes from this idea that Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of Unity, this idea that he had that within each of us we have inherent abilities that he calls the 12 powers. And to the extent that we harness these energies within us and work together, directing them, we will live in a place of peace and wholeness and abundance and joy. And I mentioned to you last week and the week before and the week before that 12 is way too many for me to remember. So I break them down into 6 pairs, because that makes more sense to me. I can handle 6, 12, I don't have the fingers. And the 12 pairs are faith and strength. And as I'm telling you them, I'm automatically pointing to the areas in the body where they are, because another part of this is that he associated body centers, energy centers in our body with these powers. So faith, which is in the middle of our brain, that deeply held belief system that we might have. Associated with strength, which is our backbone. And then our power to release and to birth new life, which is in our abdomen, our organs of release and regeneration. And then we looked at order and zeal, also known as enthusiasm and excitement. Order being in our belly button, that place, that orderly progression that births us from almost nothingness to magnificent, beautiful, innocent babies. And then we become magnificent, beautiful, innocent adults, just so you know. Try and remember that part too. And then last week we looked at wisdom and love, and how when wisdom, which is in our gut, when wisdom works with love, we love in a way that makes sense for everyone. It's not a love that makes ourselves small to make someone else bigger, but rather a love that honors and respects everyone. And so now we're continuing to move up this journey of our body. And today we look at the power of power, which is in our throat, and the power of imagination, which is located in our third eye, like that space right in the middle between our 2 physical eyes. And why do I feel that this is a good match of these 2 powers? Well, let's start with the power of power. First, it is associated with the color purple. And the color purple is the color of royalty. So it's as if the person in power is the person who gets to speak. And when we think of power, and we think of why that might be so important for us to remember, is because have you ever been in a situation where you wanted to speak up about something and then found yourself feeling literally throttled, like as if you can't? And do you notice that it happens right here, that this is where that feeling generates? And so power is our ability to use our word. Not just the spoken word, although that is true too, but also the words that we speak to ourselves. I'm sure all of us have had the situation where we've had an amazing day, everything is going great, and one person says something to us that cuts us to the quick, and it feels as if the rug has been pulled out from under us. Has that ever happened to anybody? Yeah. This is the power of our power. The power of our word. And I remember when I first kind of had this aha moment. I was in White Rock. You know how sometimes you get an aha and not just the idea, but also the location and everything is fixed in your mind? Well, I was driving down 140th, just down the hill, and it's like this burst of our job is to manage our power kind of hit me. I was like, wow. The power of our power is the power of our word. And we all know people with overdeveloped power, and sometimes we are those people. And overdeveloped power uses force. The force of our words, rather than the wisdom of our words, to coerce and control and make people do what we want, or we'll make their lives miserable. That's an overdeveloped use of our power of power. An underdeveloped use is when we are so afraid to speak that we literally feel that lump in our throat and we don't speak up. And the problem, of course, with that is that that lump is sad. It's longing for expression. And so whether we overdevelop our power to speak or we have an underdeveloped power to speak, neither of them move us to where we want to be, which is inspiring, uplifting, loving, compassionate, accepting, inclusive people who, by the force of our love, rather than the force of our force, can uplift the people around us. It is so important then to develop this skill of using our words to uplift. In the book of Proverbs, there are two quotes from 12:18. There is one whose rash words are like sword thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. The tongue of the wise brings healing. And elsewhere in Proverbs, we are told that life and death is in the power of the tongue. Our ability to spread life and uplift life is in the power of the words we speak to ourselves and to everyone else. And our power to repress, depress, suppress, de-energize, is equally in that vibration of our words. We have immense power. We think of it as the power of prayer. 2 or more are gathered. Power, energy. So why do we feel sometimes that we are stuck, powerless to speak? Well, often because we care so much about the other person or the relationship that we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, or we don't want to rock the boat, or we don't want to escalate and make them upset. We don't want to be seen as unlovable or unloving or disagreeable. And so, and forgive me, gentlemen, but this is true a lot for the women, is we've been taught to go along to get along, to be nice, to be kind, to be agreeable. And that's true. And once in a while, it's also true that we want to speak up and say what we may feel uncomfortable saying. I heard this earlier this week, that it is better to have short-term discomfort than long-term dysfunction. And I thought, that's kind of cool. Because I think a lot of us lived, I know I did for a while, lived in long-term dysfunction because I was too scared to speak what needed to be said. And so the whole idea is to have the uncomfortable conversation now rather than allow dysfunction to blossom in the future. And whether that's true or not for you in this moment, know that there are times, think back to the times when you use your word in a way that takes the energy out of you, even if it's not out of the other people around. And I'm reminded of Henry Ford, who said, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. And that is the power of our power. Manage our words and what we say and how we say it, not just to the people around us, but to ourselves as well. Well, that's all very good and fine. Easy to say. Blah, blah, blah. Minister, blah, 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 blah. Harder to do. And this is where we engage another one of our powers to support us. And that power is imagination. And imagination is characterized by the color light blue. Think of the sky. Anything can happen in the sky. And it is with imagination that we get to play what if. And if you think about it, look around at anything at all, and you realize that in order for it to get to reality, it needed to start in somebody's mind with the words, what if? What if, instead of 3-legged stools, we added a 4th and made a chair? What if we made a wheel and then made another wheel and then put a little bar around and connected them? And what if Everything begins with this idea of a seed thought. It is our capacity to picture what might be that is in our power of imagination. And when we are in an anxious place, when we are in a place of fear, when we are in a place where we are emotionally escalated, then our ability to think in that imaginative way, to imagine, is literally choked off. Because when we're in that place, our oxygen is being directed by our limbic system to places in our body that will help us to escape and survive and so on. And so, know that if you are in a place where it seems like nothing is coming to you, try and get yourself into a place where you can relax. Because your prefrontal cortex, which is the most recent development of the human brain, needs the oxygen to imagine and think. And it doesn't happen when we are in a place of fight or flight or freeze or fawn even. It is with our imagination that we can picture the best. And with our imagination that we can imagine the worst. It is with our imagination that we find that we feel trapped. This is the underdevelopment of an imagination, is we feel trapped, that there's no way out, that there are no solutions, that I'm stuck. And sometimes our overactive imaginations can create, oh my goodness, some amazing stories that have nothing to do with what's in front of us and is real. And so it's important here. What's important about this power of imagination? It is to imagine the perfect outcome. Begin with the end in mind. And if you're imagining a difficult conversation, consider imagining it going well. Imagine the end, the hug, the greater connection, the feeling of relief because you've spoken the truth. That relief that comes with honesty rather than holding it in. In the book of Philippians, we are told by Paul, in his letter to the Philippians, probably my favorite verse in the entire Christian scriptures, and that is, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about these things. So we have, as humans, a tendency, and it's part of our reptilian brain, to look for and focus on the negative. So after a talk on a Sunday, I may have 15 people say, "This was absolutely great, you were speaking just to me." And I might have one person who has some sort of constructive criticism. And which is the thing that you think I focus on the most? We all know it. And so knowing that that is just the way it is, it's actually part of our wiring. It's to look for threat. It's to look for things that don't feel quite 100% safe. So it's actually very, I hate the word normal, Barb, sorry. Barb always says normal is only a setting on the dryer. But it is actually a very normal human response to focus on the negative, which is the reason why I did away with performance reviews when I had the opportunity to. Because we're like, this is great, this is great, this is great, this is great, this is awful, let's work on that, let's work on that, let's work on that. Oh, this is great, this, you know. It's the most disempowering thing possible. And so, what can we do to use our imagination to empower us and build our power muscle? Well, there are a couple of ideas. The first is one that Walt reminded me of earlier today, and that is that you can actually build a vision board. It's fun to cut things out and play with them, and at some point people might say, "Oh, that's woo-woo." And at other times, you realize that actually what you're doing is putting word energy, managing your power, into something that is visible to you in your imagination. And it does activate. When I was a little girl, I used to have above my bed a poster of the sun shining through this forest of trees. And I grew up in South Africa. There was nothing quite like that where I was. And look at where I live now, in a place where in less than a few minutes, I can look out and see that exact picture. That one that was on my wall when I was 7 or 8 years old. There's something about the power of envisioning. And if that is true, and I'm going to encourage you to play with it, then what's also true is we have the power to revision. And by that I mean that often we are holding in our imagination all of the negative experiences that we had as a kid that brought us to where we are now. And sometimes the power of our word when we speak about that is all the adverse childhood experiences. There's a name for it, ACE, adverse childhood experiences. And I'm not saying that they didn't exist, because they do. And I'm going to encourage you to use your power of imagination to revision what that did for you. What kind of person you are now, not the negative parts that you might not like about yourself, but the positive parts that came as a result of some of these adverse childhood experiences. Because when you do that, you change your story from victim to survivor, from victim to victor. And when you do that, you harness the power of your word. So, write down, if you can. If you're having a discussion, fearing a discussion, write down the reasons why this matters to you, and then write down the words you want to say. It's all in your imagination. Build a vision board for your future. Consider creating a revision board for your past. And in all things, manage your power to create. The words are yours, and you have the power to manage them with your imagination. I bless you.